Marcia Taylor crouched beside the grand marble fountain in the lobby of the Sterling Crown Hotel, scrubbing dried mineral streaks from the tile, her third shift this week on hands and knees. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. One glance at the number, and she stood up straighter. It was Leiden University. She pressed the call to her ear and switched languages mid-step, her Dutch fluid and formal. She did not notice Emil Savage standing across the lobby, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. The billionaire owner of the Sterling Crown rarely made appearances, let alone lingered in the lobby without entourage. Yet there he was, observing her like she had just cracked the ceiling. She ended the call with a polite, "Dank u wel tot ziens," and turned back to the spray bottle, only to find her supervisor, Mr. Harris, closing in fast. "Since when do we take personal calls in the lobby?" he snapped. His tone was sharper than necessary. White front desk clerks chatted on their phones daily. Marcia knew that. So did Harris. Without waiting for her response, he reached for his clipboard and scribbled something down. "You are on overnight restroom sanitation for the rest of the week," he said. "Maybe that will remind you where you belong." Marcia's fingers tightened around the bottle, but she said nothing. From across the room, Emil Savage remained. Still, watching, the Sterling Crown Hotel sparkled with glass chandeliers, gold trim, and the illusion of fairness. But beneath the polish, Marcia Taylor felt the temperature drop, not in the air, but in the eyes around her. The day after her phone call, no one said her name at morning roll call. Mr. Harris handed out assignments with his usual clipped tone, pausing only when he reached her. No eye contact, just a sharp nod toward the clipboard. Overnight restrooms again. By her second night shift, even the other housekeeping staff, usually friendly enough to share cleaning supplies or break room gossip, kept their distance. The jokes no longer reached her end of the hallway. Conversations stopped when she entered the room, and when she passed the front desk, the young white clerks leaned in a little closer to each other, whispering in ways they did not bother to hide. It was not just the silence. It was the look Mr. Harris gave her every time he saw her. Not anger, but something colder, measured, like he was calculating how long she would last before giving up. On her third consecutive night in the public restrooms, Marcia kneeled with a bleach rag pressed to the edge of a stall. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Her gloves had torn, and the sting of chemicals prickled her fingertips. She closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself in numbers. She spoke 6 languages. She had a degree in international affairs, and she was mopping dried vomit from a bathroom floor at 3 a.m. The UN application deadline was 12 days away. She needed 2 recommendation letters, a recent transcript, and a written essay in French. The call from Leiden had been about a missing document, one she could still replace if the Sterling Crown would release her official employment records. But HR had stopped responding to her emails. "Housekeeping is not a place for ambition," she overheard one of the newer staff say during a smoke break. "Especially not the kind that speaks fluent Dutch in front of the boss." By the end of the week, the whispers had turned into something closer to mockery. One of the desk clerks, a sharp-cheeked man named Blake, smirked when she passed by. "So how do you say toilet brush in Dutch, Marcia?" She walked past him without a word. The hardest part was not the isolation. It was the fact that she had come here believing this job was temporary. A 6-month stopgap while she worked on her applications. When she had first walked into the lobby of the Sterling Crown, wearing her pressed navy uniform, she had believed that no one could take her education from her. That her voice, polished, fluent, capable, would make her stand out for the right reasons. But the moment she opened her mouth in Dutch, she became something else in their eyes. Not impressive, not valuable, suspicious. On Sunday morning, she sat in the empty break room, a styrofoam cup of lukewarm tea in her hands. Her uniform smelled like ammonia. Her back ached. And for the first time in months, she considered quitting, not because she could not handle the work, but because she realized something deeply unsettling. The hotel did not care who she was outside of the uniform. Her degree, her ambition, her fluency in 6 languages. It did not fit their idea of what a black maid should be. And when she defied that image, they punished her for it. Still, she could not quit. Not yet. The UN assistantship was still on the table. Barely. If she left now, she would lose the income she needed to finalize her paperwork. The rent, the bus pass, the meal she budgeted down to the last cent. She opened her tablet and drafted an email to HR again, this time copying the front desk manager and including a formal request under Labor Code 813.9 for the release of employment documentation. She hit send. Then she closed the screen. Across the room, the staff bulletin board had been updated. New schedules, training updates, a pinned photo from the annual employee of the quarter brunch. All white faces. She stood up and clocked back in. Her knuckles were cracked. Her throat sore from hours of breathing in chemicals, but her spine did not bend. Not yet. The call came through the walkie at 7:03 a.m., just as Marcia was finishing her overnight shift. Her gloves were off, but the bleach smell lingered in her palms. She was wiping down the last brass fixture in the executive lounge restroom when the radio crackled. "Marcia Taylor, report to the executive floor, Mr. Savage's office." Immediately, the floor beneath her seemed to tilt. Not Mr. Harris, not a supervisor. Mr. Emil Savage. For 3 months, she had only seen him in glimpses, always from a distance. A tailored suit, graying temples, and a stillness that made him seem more myth than man. The billionaire owner of the Sterling Crown rarely interacted with staff. If his name came up, it was usually followed by the phrase, "eyes everywhere." Now he wanted to see her? Alone? Her shoes clicked too loudly on the marble staircase. She caught her reflection in a mirrored wall and winced. Her uniform was wrinkled. Her bun was loose. She wiped a smudge from her collar and tried to look composed, even as her stomach knotted. The executive wing was silent, cold, and lined with black walnut panels. His office door, matte black with brass lettering, opened before she knocked. A personal assistant motioned her inside without a word. Savage stood at the window, overlooking the city skyline. He did not turn to greet her. Just spoke, "You speak Dutch. European Dutch, not Flemish. From Leiden, I assume?" Her voice stayed calm, though her pulse thudded in her ears. "Yes, sir. I studied at Leiden University for 2 years during my degree." Now he turned. His gaze was not cruel or cold. It was calculating. "Why are you cleaning restrooms?" The question held no sarcasm, no mockery, just blunt curiosity. "I needed work while applying for an assistantship," she said carefully. "The Sterling Crown offered night shifts that would not conflict with my interviews." He walked to his desk, picked up a file, and flipped it open. Inside was her full application, resume, references, the email she had sent to HR. "You're overqualified for housekeeping," he said, plainly, "and your supervisors seem oddly determined to bury that." She said nothing. "I need someone multilingual, discreet, and sharp enough not to waste my time. We are hosting a diplomatic summit in 6 days. Several European envoys are attending, including a Dutch delegation. I want you to serve as a temporary multilingual guest liaison. You'll report directly to me for the duration of their stay." Marcia blinked. Her first instinct was to ask if this was a mistake, if he had meant to call someone else, but she held her tongue. Savage closed the folder. "You'll receive executive access and a wardrobe stipend. I expect professionalism, punctuality, and no tolerance for mediocrity. I have reasons for this arrangement, but I suggest you focus on your responsibilities." She nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I accept." "Good. Training begins tomorrow. I'll have Angela brief you." That was it. No formal dismissal, no handshake, just a nod and a pivot back toward the skyline. As she walked out, her knees felt light. Not from relief, but from a sudden weight shift, like gravity had changed its grip on her life. In the elevator, she stared at her reflection again. Same woman. Same uniform. But something had cracked open. Later that day, she received a sealed envelope with a temporary access badge, schedule, and uniform measurements for tailoring. The housekeeping staff saw the change immediately. She returned, in a sharply pressed suit, her badge marked with a blue stripe. The stairs followed her through the hallway like spotlights. Blake, the smug front desk clerk, stopped mid-joke when she passed. At her new desk just outside the executive boardroom, she was briefed on delegate arrivals, preferred greetings, and the precise way one should bow when addressing an envoy from Osaka. She studied every file with military focus, slept only 4 hours a night, ate at her desk, rehearsed Dutch pleasantries and Mandarin greetings with headphones in. Still, doubt lingered. Was this truly a promotion or a test? And why had Savage, who barely spoke to staff, pulled her from the bottom of the chain? The summit drew closer. Tension mounted. Executives scurried through corridors with binders and sweat stains. Yet Marcia stood at the center of it all, calm and composed. She did not fully trust the opportunity, but she respected its danger. This was not just a chance to step out of housekeeping. It was a chance to be seen finally, for everything she carried inside her. The hotel would watch her now, every step, every word. But she had spent her whole life preparing for that stage. The first warning sign was subtle, but unmistakable. On the morning of the summit's opening ceremony, Marcia passed the East Wing elevator where the delegates from Beijing were set to arrive. A temporary placard had been placed on the wall, printed in Mandarin. Except it did not say what it was supposed to say. The sign, which was meant to read, "Welcome to the Sterling Crown, a sanctuary of global harmony," instead read, "Sterling, metal place, happy luck for Rice diplomats." Marcia blinked twice, then again. She spoke Mandarin at a conversational level and could tell immediately. This was not just poor translation. It was outright mockery. She tore the placard down before any delegates could see it and headed straight to the internal translation archive. Every official welcome sign, menu card, room directory, and gift tag, across 6 languages, had been handled by the same vendor. That vendor's name was on the internal contract records, Harris Language Solutions, a small LLC she had never heard of. And yet, they had been paid more than $47,000 for what should have been basic translation services. Her instincts kicked in like clockwork. She dug deeper into the vendor profile. The listed contact? Eden Harris, a recent college graduate, no certifications in translation, no formal linguistic background. One search later, Marcia found her LinkedIn profile. Eden was the niece of Supervisor Harris. Marcia opened the financial records. Invoice after invoice showed charges grossly inflated. $9,000 for a weekend translation of 8 Japanese menu items, $5,700 for formatting Arabic greeting cards. She had once translated a similar menu at her student job in the Netherlands. It had taken her 2 hours. For €50, her pulse sharpened. The fraud was not just casual nepotism. It was systemic, bold, and hidden in plain sight. Later that afternoon, during a routine logistics briefing, she approached Amanda Reyes, an HR specialist known for being quiet but fair. Marcia leaned in. "Can I ask something off the record?" Amanda hesitated, then nodded. "Do we track who gets internal promotions by department and race?" Marcia asked. Amanda said nothing at first, then, "Not publicly." "Do you know where I might find those numbers?" Amanda studied her. "Why do I get the feeling you already know what they'll say?" Marcia did not answer. That evening, an encrypted file arrived in her inbox. No subject line, just a name. Amanda R. Confidential. She clicked it open and read through the rows. Over the past 4 years, more than 130 promotions had been awarded, across administrative, executive, and concierge services. Of those, 89% had gone to white employees. Only 2 had gone to black staff members, neither in roles that interacted with guests. Marcia scrolled down. In housekeeping, out of 37 staff members, she was the only one with a college degree. She was also the only one who had submitted an internal application for transfer, and the only one whose request had been denied. Suddenly, every long silence made sense. Every ignored resume. Every smirk from Blake at the front desk when she passed. They had buried her on purpose. And now they were funneling hotel funds through a family-run language scam, too arrogant to even fake quality. The next morning, Emil Savage stopped at her desk on the way to his suite. He paused, watching Isa, her close her laptop. "Something wrong with the Mandarin signage yesterday?" he asked quietly. Marcia stood, looked him in the eye. "Yes, and I think I know why." He gestured toward the hallway. "Walk with me." They passed through the west wing, down the art corridor. Guests bustled around them, unaware that something inside the hotel's polished walls had started to crack. Marcia handed him a slim folder she had prepared that morning. Inside were printouts of the mistranslations, vendor records, LinkedIn screenshots, and a comparison chart showing language, certification rates among staff and vendors. "I checked with internal HR," she said. "The company handling translations is owned by Mr. Harris's niece. She was paid 10 times the market rate. The work is not only unprofessional, it is insulting." Savage flipped through the folder, his expression unreadable. "There is more," she added. "I believe hiring and promotion patterns within the hotel reflect an active suppression of qualified black employees, including myself." He closed the folder, said nothing for a moment. Then, "Can you get me everything, including digital records? I want timestamps, names, and every invoice." "I already started," Marcia said. "I'll have a full report by tomorrow." Savage nodded once. "Good." As he walked away, Marcia felt the shift again. This was no longer about her resume, or the Dutch call, or a single broken sign. It was about exposing the machine behind the marble. The invisible gears that protected privilege while punishing excellence. And now, for the first time, she was inside the engine room. The final day of the summit began under overcast skies, as if the weather itself anticipated a storm. By noon, dignitaries gathered in the grand ballroom for closing remarks. Elsewhere, behind a locked set of mahogany double doors on the executive floor, a different kind of summit was underway. Only 5 people were in the room. Emil Savage at the head. Of the long table, Marcia seated beside him. Across from her, Supervisor Harris, Eden Harris, and legal counsel Monica Stein. A quiet tension hummed through the space, restrained but combustible. Savage spoke first, calm but firm. "Before this summit concludes, we need clarity on several internal matters. Ms. Taylor has compiled a report. I would like it presented now." Marcia stood. Her hands were steady, her voice sharper than it had ever been. She began with the facts. Over the past 4 months, the hotel paid over $47,000 to Harris Language Solutions for multilingual signage and guest materials. The vendor has no verified certifications. The owner, Eden Harris, holds no language credentials and is the niece of Supervisor Harris. She clicked the remote. A screen on the wall displayed invoice totals, side by side with known market rates. The margins were outrageous. One guest pamphlet in Arabic had cost the hotel more than a month's salary for housekeeping staff. Marcia continued. I cross-referenced the vendor's output with qualified translators. Several documents were not only grammatically incorrect but deeply offensive, particularly those meant for the Mandarin delegation. She tapped again. Up came a side-by-side translation comparison. The room fell into silence. Supervisor Harris shifted in his seat. "This is not a trial. You are making dangerous accusations based on incomplete information." Marcia did not flinch. I am citing direct financial records and published materials from this very building. Eden, pale and visibly shaken, finally spoke. I was just helping. My uncle said they needed someone fast. I never. Did you sign those invoices yourself? Savage asked. Eden nodded, then looked down. Marcia reached for the final document. And lastly, here is a breakdown of internal promotions and transfer approvals by department. Over 130 promotions in the last 4 years. Only 2 black employees promoted, none to guest-facing positions. I submitted an internal transfer request 3 times. All were denied without cause. The folder slid across the table. Supervisor Harris's face flushed red. That is not relevant to the translation issue, he barked. Savage leaned forward. No, but it is relevant to the pattern. Harris opened his mouth to respond, but Savage was already standing. I have seen enough. He turned to Harris, his tone now razor sharp. You have 2 options. You can resign quietly by end of day, or I will initiate public termination proceedings, followed by a full legal and financial audit of your department. The silence that followed was heavier than anything said aloud. Eden's eyes filled with tears. Harris looked like he had aged a decade in 3 minutes. Savage continued. The board of directors has already been briefed. They will expect a response from you tonight. Marcia remained seated, calm, focused. She had not raised her voice once. She did not need to. The evidence had done the work. So had her integrity. As the meeting adjourned, Savage placed a hand on her shoulder. Not in congratulations, but in recognition. Be ready, he said under his breath. This is only the beginning. And just like that, the door opened. But this time, Marcia was not walking back to mop floors. She was stepping into a different kind of future, one she had carved out with facts, poise, and the truth no one had wanted to see. 2 days later, every employee at Sterling Crown was summoned to the main ballroom. Rows of staff lined the room, chefs in aprons, clerks in pressed uniforms, housekeepers with folded hands. At the front, a massive projection screen glowed under the crystal chandeliers. Emil Savage stepped to the podium without fanfare. I believe in hospitality, he said. Not just in serving guests, but in honoring those who serve. He tapped the remote. Slide after slide filled the screen. Hiring charts, promotion graphs, racial disparity breakdowns. The numbers were indisputable. The faces in leadership told their own story. The crowd murmured. Some looked stunned. Others looked unsurprised, but finally seen. Then came the invoices, the signatures, the translations, and finally a slide titled, Whistleblower, Marcia Taylor. Emil's voice steadied. This woman, who joined us as a housekeeper, prevented a catastrophic breach in international protocol. She uncovered fraud. She stood up when it was inconvenient, and she did it with integrity. He turned toward her. Marcia, on behalf of the Sterling Crown and the board, thank you. The ballroom erupted in applause. Not polite, not performative. It was long. Real. Harris and Eden were not in the room. Their resignations had been filed. HR announced the formation of a new equity and leadership development program overseen by an independent advisory panel. After the assembly, Emil found Marcia near the same marble column where this entire story began. I meant what I said, he told her. You have 2 options, a permanent role in our global operations team, or a full scholarship to finish your graduate studies abroad. Your choice. Marcia did not answer right away. She stood quietly, taking it all in. The polished floors, the place where her voice in Dutch first caught unwanted attention, now felt different. That evening her laptop glowed with a confirmation email, one-way flight to Geneva. Departure, Sunday. She smiled, not because the battle was easy, but because it had been worth it. The lobby no longer felt like a place of limits. It felt like a place she had outgrown. And just like that, Marcia Taylor stepped into the future, fluent not just in language, but in courage.